Hey bookish friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Rain. If you've been here before and you're returning, thank you so much again for being here. Today we're gonna be reading 1-star reviews of my 5-star reads. I think this is gonna be really funny, so I'm really looking forward to it. Let's dive right into it. Okay, the first book I'm gonna be going through is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is my favorite of the Harry Potter books. It's not my favorite movie. I think it's the worst movie, but it's the best book. So I'm excited to see what people think. Being the best out of an assortment of mediocrity doesn't make you not mediocre. If I remember the 5th book correctly, then I'm not excited to read the next 3 books. Well, this is the 4th book, and I definitely wouldn't agree that Harry Potter is a mediocre series. Is there nowhere to hide from this? That's pretty funny. 1 star, my favorite. DNF at 45%. The Harry Potter book series isn't for me, unfortunately. I can respect that. Doesn't have to be for everybody. Such a difficult book to read because it was slow and boring, emphasizing things I did not care about. This book was the main reason it took me so long to finish the series. This is interesting. This book definitely dives more into Harry's inner world, so I could see how that wouldn't be for everybody. It's something that I enjoyed, but I respect that. Okay, next going on to The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. This is the dumbest thing I have ever read. I am so pissed about the high rating. Wow. There wasn't a single thing that made even the tiniest bit of sense, and it kept getting dumber and dumber, even when you didn't think it was possible. I didn't think this book was dumb. I didn't think it kept getting worse and worse. In the middle of the book, we had a change of perspective, and I thought that that was really intriguing, so it got better and better, in my opinion, but to each their own. First, the wife upstairs equals Verity. Now the housemaid equals the last Mrs. Parrish. Why does she not have any other original books of her own? This is interesting. I have read Verity and The Housemaid. I haven't read The First Wife Upstairs or The Last Mrs. Parrish, but looking through a lot of the reviews, a lot of them said that this was like a knockoff of Mrs. Parrish. Again, I haven't read it, so I can't speak to that. All I can say is that I loved The Housemaid itself, and if that is the case, that is overall above her. Did not like at all. So bad I don't even know where to begin. Update, I finally questioned the person that recommended this to me. That's a choice. It seems I was confused and she wanted me to read The Maid, which I did and enjoyed, restored my faith in her recommendations. I read The Maid as well in one of my previous reading vlogs, and I liked it. I definitely didn't like it as much as The Housemaid. It is a different kind of book. The Maid is more of a cozy mystery, and The Housemaid is more of a thriller. So I could understand how you might like one more than the other if that's what you're looking for. Okay, moving on to Finlay Donovan is Killing It. This one I debated giving 5 stars to, but then as I sat on it for a day, I just thought I had so much fun reading this book, and if I had such a great time, like that's gotta be a 5-star for me. So let's see how people feel about this being a 1-star book. I genuinely don't know how this book has so many great reviews. I read someone else's review that says this book reads like a bad YA novel, only less mature, and I completely agree. Also, early in the story, a character refers to something as cliched, and the protagonist says, "Is that an SAT word?" And I personally found that very hard to swallow. That's kind of funny. I don't understand why everyone rates this book as one of their best books of the year. I found it way too far-fetched, and I read a lot of fantasy. I don't typically enjoy reading books where the plot is almost entirely driven by a woman being completely incompetent and helpless beyond belief. Definitely not for me. Totally cool that it's not for you. I found the far-fetched aspect of this book to be endearing and kind of fun. It is not a realistic book. Like, this is not something that's going to happen in real life by any stretch of the imagination. I thought it was kind of whimsical in that way. It's so unbelievable that I thought that was part of its charm, personally. I didn't finish this book. I got about a third of the way through and was so annoyed by the main character that I skimmed to the end for the last couple of chapters and called it good enough. The ending set up for a sequel, but I'll obviously be skipping it. The sequel is really good. I think it's a bummer to miss like that whole middle part of the book. Skipping from the beginning to the end is like not my favorite way to approach a book. I personally never skip to the end. Leave in the comments whether you have read the last chapter of a book before reading the whole book. I'm genuinely curious how many people do that. I've never done it before, but if you have, I want to know why. This book was so terrible. I not only couldn't finish it, but I returned it to the store I bought it at. I could not be a part of the author thinking I likes it. The character was a whiny victim and I just couldn't do it. I don't personally believe like every character has to be the best person or have the most likable traits in the world. I also think Finlay's pretty funny in that way. 1 star, trash. Okay, now I'm gonna go on to 3 nonfiction books that are some of my favorites. The first one is Cultish by Amanda Montell. This book discusses language that cults use in order to lure people in, and she describes it as everything from Jonestown to SoulCycle and how everything falls on a cultish spectrum. You know how we say like SoulCycle or CrossFit has a cult following. So we talk about everything from that to more serious and notorious cults like Jonestown and Heaven's Gate. Gave this 50 pages before giving up. Mediocre writing, annoying, and an overly present author. And maybe interesting if you haven't thought or read much about fringe religions at all. Interesting. There are some interesting pieces of information in here, and for those, I'd say it's okay. But like the other reviewers have mentioned, the way it's laid out feels really disorganized. It got to be irksome that the author continuously brought up points and then would say, but more on that later. Like, just tell me now. I don't know, it's not a bad book, just not for me. She did say, but more on that later a lot. The way she structured the book was more notorious cults than kind of middle of the road on the cultish spectrum, and then getting to the lighter ones like SoulCycle and CrossFit. So she would bring up a piece of cultish language, but then say, I'm gonna talk about that more later, like in a different section. The only thing I liked about this book was the cover. The cover does slap. An exercise in defeat fueled totally by unchecked personal biases, inadequate sourcing, and a shockingly absent desire to consider socioeconomic standings or intersectionality and how they influence personal choice. Not even worth trying to understand how she justifies her stances, which seem to be that millennials and young generations somehow struggle with having too much choice despite an easily refutable contrary. Another product of privilege not worth considering. I thought this book presented people who fall into cults or cult-like organizations to be pretty empathetic for the most part. I find the argument about lack of intersectionality very interesting and not something I've thought about. Now I'm going to be talking about How to Be Perfect by Michael Schur. In this book, he takes these concepts in moral philosophy and applies them to everyday life in ways that are funny and things that are as simple as, do I have to return my shopping cart to the shopping cart rack thingy? It's all the way over there. So I love this book. I've read it multiple times. I'll probably read it again. It just gives me the giggles. I tried really hard to like this. Perhaps because I had an audiobook version, or perhaps it just seemed to drone on and on, but I couldn't really get into this and returned it early. Boring. For certain, funny, not enough good points, rarely. I'm sorry, Matt. I love Parks and Rec, The Good Place, and Moe's in The Office, but wow, I did not find this book humorous or interesting. I wonder if he's talking about like Mike, like Mike Schur. I don't know who Matt is. Maybe it's the person who recommended the book to him, but that made me giggle. A simplistic presentation of the way of perfection. The author shallowly evaluates various secular theories viewed only from the vantage point through which all of his preconceived notions can be affirmed. I would recommend one chapter from the book, beyond which further reading is futile. I wonder which chapter of the book that is. Since I did not finish, I can't give a full review. I'll just say that leaving out Thomas Aquinas because he's religious, parentheses, then raving about Buddhist philosophies, end parentheses, shows that there's a bias right from the start. Aquinas doesn't just talk about God. I also was frustrated with his long explanations of Kant and utilitarianism, followed by long explanations of the holes in these theories. He is funny though, I'll give him that. He definitely didn't claim to include all of the great thinkers in moral philosophy, so he had to kind of cherry pick which ones he wanted to talk about, certainly to push whatever narrative he found was funniest or most relevant or would be easily digestible to the general public. But I would definitely agree that he didn't include everyone, which he openly admits to. Okay, now I'm going to read some reviews from what is probably my favorite nonfiction book. It's a memoir of sorts, but it is a lot more than that in my opinion. I very rarely leave reviews on Goodreads. I'm not a big review person in general when it comes to actually like sitting down and writing reviews, but this book meant a lot to me and was really profound and is about a neurosurgeon who finds out that he has cancer, and he's grappling with the end of his life and morality and coming to terms with the way that he's approached his profession and trying to decide what he wants to do with the time that he has left. So these reviews are gonna hit different. Okay, here we go. While it is truly tragic what happened to this guy, he did end up passing. This was a surprisingly boring book, not that well written considering he fancied himself a great writer, and the author comes across as pompous and arrogant. The best part of the book is the epilogue written by his wife. The epilogue is beautiful. The epilogue is about how he did pass away and how important this piece of work was to him. I didn't find him pompous. I found him very honestly confronting his shortcomings in the book, which he definitely had a lot of when he was practicing as a neurosurgeon. And I didn't find that he particularly was talking about how wonderful his writing was. He definitely talked a lot about how passionate he was about his writing, but I didn't find it pompous or arrogant personally. Maybe I'm heartless for not being moved by this, but I saw another review that stated an alternate title could be How the Upper Class Dies, and I think that says enough. This is very interesting to me. I think that there's a lot to be said about discrepancies in end-of-life care and class. So that's a very interesting conversation. I think the point of the book was more about how we will all grapple with death and what that's gonna look like when it happens to all of us inevitably. Themes were very basic and the conversations seemed to attempt at deep thought, but were in fact trite. Overall, the author seems to evaluate his situation simply because of his profession. The plot was pedantic and far too linear to lend any creative merit. I disagree. Well, that was fun, honestly. I like hearing different people's opinions and perspectives. I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that we all have different views on books and different preferences and things that we like and things that we find off-putting. And I think that's the moral of the story here. While I very strongly disagree with some of these reviews, I respect their opinion, I respect your opinion. So if at any point I say I love a book that you hate or I hate a book that you love, that's okay. We can all coexist and have different opinions. But thank you so much for watching to the end of the video if you have. And if you have, drop this emoji in the comments for me and let me know if you ever have skipped to the end of a book to read the ending chapters. Thank you so much again for watching. If you feel so inclined to subscribe or to leave a like, it would really mean a lot to me. And I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.